guys, Mr. Edwards here, Centreville High School Automotive Technology. Today we're working on our 1996 Toyota Camry, and we're going to be replacing the rear struts and springs on it. The rear struts on it, if you remember on our used car inspection we did on it, were leaking and pretty soft, and the springs have 149,000 miles worth of going over speed bumps on them. So we're going to go ahead and replace the whole things as assemblies. Let's get started. So back here in the back of the car, our rear strut and spring assembly bolts up to the rear knuckle with 2 bolts down there. It's got a couple things, the brake hose and the ABS wire that go through it that we have to take off of it, and the rear sway bar link, or sway bar end link, needs to come off as well. We're going to be replacing these in a separate video. They're pretty wore out. The one on the other side has a little bit of play in it. But just to replace these struts, they at least need to come off. To get to the top of the strut, there's going to be 3 nuts up top, and to get inside of there, on some cars you have to go through the trunk to get to it. On these cars you have to come through the back seat. So to get to that, we're going to have to pull a bunch of stuff here in the back apart. So the first thing that I'm going to do before I get my hands too dirty is come in here and get my back seat taken apart so I can get to the top of the strut mount. To do that, I need to come in here and find where the back of the, or where the bottom of the back seat mounts down. It just clips in, and give it a good tug, and it should pop up. Same thing on that side over there. Find where it mounts down. They can be in there pretty snug, but they'll pop up. Now I'm going to push my seatbelt buckles through so they're not in the way, and I can just pull my back seat bottom up and out. Set it off to the side. I want to be careful where I set this down at because I don't want to get it dirty or anything if I can help it. Now, on the side of the back seat, on each side, there's these little covers here. On the bottom of them, there's a bolt, which looks about a 12mm bolt if I had to guess. We'll find out in a minute. I need to take this bolt out so that I can get this side cover off here, and behind this side cover, hopefully we can access our upper strut mount. So I should be able to come in here, pull this cover up, 12mm fits on there, comes loose. Spin it all the way out. And now with the bolt out of here, I'm going to pull my back seat back forward some. There's a button on it. Tip it forward, and I should just be able to pull this cover off of here. And with it tipped forward, pull up on this side cover, and it should just pop off. So with this side cover out of the way, if I move this piece of fabric up a little bit, you guys can now see there's the 3 nuts on the top of the strut that we need to take off. So now that I've got everything disassembled inside the car and I'm ready to take those top nuts off when I'm ready, now I need to take apart some stuff out here before I can unbolt the actual strut. I need to unbolt this, looks like maybe 12mm bolt that holds the brake hose as it goes through it. I need to unbolt the 10mm bolt behind it that hopefully you guys can see back there that holds this ABS wire, and I'm going to unbolt the 10mm bolt up there for the ABS wire as well, so that when we unbolt the knuckle from the strut, we don't put any strain on this wire here. Alright, so all those bolts are out, my brake hose is loose, my ABS wire has plenty of slack in it now, so I'm not going to damage it. Next thing I need to do is take off my sway bar link over here. The way that I'm going to do that is there's this nut up top here, and if we're lucky we can just blast that nut off there with an impact gun. If the whole thing spins inside of it, which it's halfway likely to do, we're going to have to hold the back of it with a pair of vice grips. So I've got my impact gun on it here. It's a 14mm. We'll see what happens. Yep, the whole thing wants to spin. See, as I'm loosening, the nut's not coming off any further. So I need to get a pair of vice grips and hold the back of it. So I've got a pair of small vice grips here that I'm going to adjust, and I'm clamping it just behind where the sway bar link goes through the bracket on the strut. adjust them, and clamp them tight. Now, hopefully, we can spin this nut off of here. Just like that. Sway bar link off, out of the way. So now that I've got my brake hose loose, my ABS wire loose, and my sway bar link off, I'm ready to take off the two big nuts and bolts that hold the bottom of the strut here and go through the knuckle. The bolt head of it is on the front of it, facing the front of the car, and then there's a nut on the back. There's one on top, one down here on the bottom. If you guys can see, I'll move the wires and stuff down there. And we need to take both of those off and hold the nuts on the back, and then they'll slide through towards us. So 19 millimeters, I'll get in here with my impact gun, make sure I'm on loose end, and then I'm holding the nut side of it with a wrench. There's the top one. Slide it out. And the bottom one. And slide that bolt out. Now my strut is loose from the knuckle itself. If I wiggle it around some, it should pop loose. Come up in here and tap on it a little bit. The knuckle itself is loose from the strut now. The knuckle will drop down a little bit, and we can wiggle our strut out of here as soon as we get the top nuts off. Now back up inside the back seat here, we're going to take off the three nuts that hold the upper strut mount. To get those off, I've got a couple of options. I can either use a ratcheting wrench to get up in here to get to them, which I'm probably going to use for at least one of them because of the location that it's at, or I can use a ratchet and a deep socket. I can't use a shallow socket because there's all this stud, all these threads that are sticking up through here. A shallow socket would not fit over that. Alright, so I'll get up in here with my ratchet and deep 12 millimeter, make sure I'm loosening, pop these nuts loose. Some of them we might not be able to get to with our ratchet and deep socket. That's where that ratcheting wrench is going to come in. The one thing to keep in mind, guys, is that when you get these nuts all the way off, that strut's going to come dropping out of the bottom of the car now. So be careful. You don't want to have the strut come falling and land on your toe because it is right below you. And now I'm going to hold the strut while I finish taking those nuts on top off by hand. And then the whole strut will pull straight out the bottom. Drop it down. Be careful not to catch the brake hose or anything. And out she comes. And now I want to set my new strut and my old strut right next to each other before I go putting my new strut in. That way I can make sure that they're the same length. Everything looks like it'll match up good. Also, if I'm replacing both and I got a pair, I want to make sure that the bracket for the sway bar link is on the correct side. Because if it's not, it's the strut for the other side of the car, because everything's reverse over there. And if I go and put that strut on this side, I'm not going to be able to bolt my sway bar link up, and I'm going to be pissed because I got to take the whole thing back apart to put the correct strut on this side. So always match your parts up, folks. This one here looks the same, should be good to go in the car. And on the old strut here, you guys can see even better now what we were looking at in our used car inspection. This strut is leaking oil out of it. It's all greasy and grimy. The rubber boot is supposed to be covering the shaft of the strut completely here. That's all that's left of it. This little torn off piece up there, and then some pieces that fell down here. This strut is shot. I mean, it's obviously original. It's 24 years old. I mean, it was time for it to get replaced. So now I got to come over here and wiggle my new strut back up in here so that I can get the top of it lined up and get those nuts started to hold it in place. And with a little wiggling, you'll get it started. And now the trick is to hold it there while you get at least one of the nuts started up top, because you don't want to let it fall back through. There's one. There's two. And they should just spin on nice and easy. So I've got all three of the nuts up top on the strut here started by hand, and I'm not going to tighten them all the way until they're tight, but I do want to pull the strut up so that we can get the bottom of it put together. So the way that I'm going to do that is just get them snug, but not all the way tight. All right, so I've got all three of the nuts up top here tightened down. They're not tight, but they're snug. That way the strut's pulled all the way up and we can put the bottom of it together. So to get the bottom of the strut together now, we need to get these two holes to line back up in the knuckle and the strut so we can get those big 19mm bolts through them. Some cars you got to really wrestle with it. This one looks like it, hopefully, don't want to jinx myself, but hopefully slid together relatively easily. Let's slide the bolts through. Want to be really careful when doing this that we don't catch the brake hose or the ABS wire or anything inside, in between the strut and the knuckle, because if you pinch them in there, you're either going to have a brake leak or no ABS. Neither of things that we want to have happen. Now I'm going to come in here with my impact gun, 19mm, and my wrench. I'll hold the nut on the back side of the bolt, tighten the bolt. Pull it snug. Same thing down here on the bottom. Good and tight. Now the next thing I need to do is put my sway bar link back on. So to do that, we're going to come up here, get it lined back up with the back of the strut here on that bracket piece. You guys will notice there's a new sway bar link on here now. That's going to be an upcoming video because that's a separate repair. Get the ball and socket joint lined up just like that. And you should just be able to tighten the nut back down on this. You shouldn't have to hold the back of it with vice grips again. It should only stick when you're removing it. We'll see if that takes place today. There we go. Good and tight. And we're going to come back over here and tighten up the brake hose, ABS wire, in the two places we took it loose. Remember, those were the 12mm and two 10mm bolts. 12mm for the brake hose. Hopefully threads back in there nice and smooth like that. And then the two 10mm for the ABS wire. And we'll come up here to this other 10mm, get it started. I can't stress enough how important it is to start every bolt by hand, guys. I see too many people start bolts with an impact gun or air ratchet or something crazy like that. That's how you destroy stuff. Does not take long to start it by hand and then go tighten it. And back up inside here, we're going to finish tightening these bolts on the top up by hand. Always by hand, not with a power tool or anything, either with the ratchet here or with the ratcheting wrench, since that's the only thing that can fit over here. Those are all good. And we're all good on this side, guys. We got our new strut put in, everything's tightened back down. We're all good to go. And then obviously over here on the other side of the back, we did the exact same thing. Nice brand new strut. Everything's bolted back up to it, nice and tight. Good to go. And we of course put the back seat all back together as well. Make sure that the side pieces are bolted back down. The bottom of it gets clipped back in, nice and secure. The one thing that you guys might make a mistake on is those seat belt buckles. Make sure you pull them back up through as you're putting the seat bottom back on. Otherwise you got to take it back out to find them and fish them back up through. But got all this all put back together too. Alright guys, so that's it. We got nice new struts and springs put on the rear of this Toyota Camry right here. It's going to go down the road nice and smooth now, hold to the road better when it goes over bumps, not have any leaking struts to worry about anymore, be nice and safe. Hope you guys learned something from watching this and enjoyed it. Make sure you fill out your reflection sheet that goes along with the video. I look forward to seeing you guys soon, and thanks for watching.